What you're about to hear is not accepted history. It's not taught in schools. It's not explained in documentaries meant for comfort. Because if even one part of this story is true, then one of the most important events of the 20th century was never actually resolved. In April 1945, the world was told Adolf Hitler was dead.
Suicide.
Burned remains. Case closed. But here's the problem. No verified body was ever publicly displayed. No independent autopsy was ever confirmed. The remains were controlled by one government, and one government alone. And multiple intelligence agencies quietly questioned the story for decades. What if the end of World War II didn't actually end its most dangerous man? Tonight, we're not claiming Hitler survived. We're doing something more dangerous. We're asking why so much of his death was hidden, why so many witnesses contradicted each other, and why files about his final days stayed classified for decades. Because history doesn't haunt us when it's false. It haunts us when something doesn't add up. Before we go further, comment, question everything. Because once you hear this, the official story will never feel complete again. The official story, what you were told. According to accepted history, Adolf Hitler died on April 30th, 1945, inside the Führer bunker beneath Berlin. The story goes like this.
Berlin was collapsing.
The Red Army was closing in.
Hitler, face une inévitable capture, chose suicide.
He allegedly bit into a cyanide capsule, shot himself, ordered his body burned. His remains were supposedly wrapped in blankets, carried outside, doused with gasoline, set on fire, and just like that, the most infamous man in history vanished into ashes. Case closed. Except, that's not how historical certainty works, because no neutral party ever confirmed the body. No press viewing. No independent forensic verification. No public remains. Only statements. And statements are not proof. Ask yourself this. If the world's most hated man truly died, why hide the body? The body problem or lack of one? When Berlin fell, the Soviets reached the bunker first. They controlled the remains, the witnesses, the narrative, and immediately, something strange happened. Instead of announcing Hitler's death clearly, Joseph Stalin told Allied leaders he believed Hitler may have escaped. Let that sink in. The leader of the Soviet Union, who had every reason to celebrate Hitler's death, publicly expressed doubt. Why? Because the remains recovered were incomplete, were heavily burned, could not be conclusively identified. Dental records were later cited as proof, but even those were based on testimony, not direct verification. No DNA testing existed. No photographs were released. And decades later, when fragments were examined, some were proven not to belong to Hitler at all. So ask yourself, if the evidence was solid, why does it keep changing? Contradictory witnesses. Multiple people inside the bunker gave testimony. But here's what history books rarely emphasize. Their stories do not perfectly align. Differences appear in timing, method of death, position of the body, who actually saw what. Some claimed a gunshot was heard. Others said only poison was used. Some saw the body. Others only saw blankets. In high-stress situations, memory can fracture. But when every detail matters, fractures matter too. And remember, these witnesses were not neutral observers. They were loyalists, prisoners, people trying to survive. Would you tell the full truth if the wrong answer meant execution? Why no body was ever shown? Think about other dictators. Mussolini's body was displayed publicly. Saddam Hussein was captured on video. Osama bin Laden's death, controversial as it was, came with proof. But Hitler? Nothing. The most significant enemy in human history, and the world never saw him dead. This absence fueled rumors instantly, and intelligence agencies noticed. The CIA and FBI files, why this didn't die. For decades after 1945, intelligence agencies quietly tracked reports of Hitler sightings.
Argentina, Chile,
Spain, even Antarctica. Were these reports true? Probably not. But here's what is true. The FBI and CIA took them seriously enough to document them. Why would professionals waste resources on a man officially confirmed dead? Because uncertainty existed. Governments don't chase ghosts unless something unsettles them. And many of these files stayed classified for decades. Ask yourself, what were they afraid people would believe? The South America escape theory. After World War II, thousands of Nazis escaped Europe. This is not speculation. This is documented history. They used ratlins, false identities, sympathetic networks. Many settled in South America. Argentina, in particular, welcomed them quietly. So here's the uncomfortable question. If mid-level officers escaped, if scientists escaped, if war criminals escaped, why is it unthinkable that Hitler might have attempted the same? Not saying he succeeded, but saying it was impossible, is intellectually dishonest. Hitler's psychology. Would he really kill himself? Hitler feared humiliation more than death. But he also feared being paraded, being mocked, being erased. Suicide guarantees control, but so does disappearance. And some psychologists argue Hitler's ego may not have allowed him to simply vanish into nothing. Others argue the opposite, that escape would preserve myth. Both possibilities exist. Which one terrifies you more? The skull fragment controversy. For decades, a skull fragment held by Russian authorities was presented as Hitler's. Then modern analysis revealed it belonged to a woman, not Hitler. That revelation didn't prove he escaped, but it destroyed confidence in Soviet evidence. Once one piece collapses, everything else becomes unstable. Why history needs closure. This story matters not because Hitler deserves attention, but because truth deserves clarity. Unanswered questions allow myths to grow, extremists to manipulate narratives, history to be weaponized. Silence doesn't end conspiracy. Transparency does. And this case never had full transparency. What most historians actually believe. Most historians still believe Hitler died in 1945. But belief is not the same as proof. And many admit the evidence is indirect. The documentation is incomplete. The narrative was politically controlled. Which means this mystery survives not because it's sensational, but because it was never fully resolved. The Soviet silence. Why Moscow never clarified. One of the most disturbing elements in this entire mystery is not what was said, but what was never clarified. After Berlin fell, the Soviet Union had complete control over the bunker site. They recovered remains. They interrogated witnesses. They sealed documents. And then they went quiet. For years, Soviet officials gave contradictory statements about Hitler's fate. Sometimes he was confirmed dead. Other times, officials hinted he may have escaped. Joseph Stalin himself reportedly told Western leaders that Hitler could be alive and hiding. This was not rumor. This came directly from the highest level of Soviet leadership. Why would Stalin do this? Some historians believe it was psychological warfare, a way to destabilize the West. Others believe the evidence Moscow had was simply insufficient. Because if the Soviets were absolutely certain, why allow doubt at all? Silence in intelligence work is never accidental. It is either protection or uncertainty. And uncertainty at that level suggests something far more uncomfortable. That even the people who claimed to know the truth weren't entirely convinced themselves. Ask yourself this: if you possessed undeniable proof, would you ever let doubt survive? The myth versus the man. Why escape rumors refuse to die? There is a reason this theory never disappears. Not because people admire Hitler, but because symbols outlive bodies. Hitler became more than a man. He became an idea, and ideas don't die easily. Throughout history, powerful figures surrounded by secrecy almost always generate survival myths. Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Elvis,
Bin Laden.
even today. But Hitler's case is different, because the world needed his death to be final, absolute, unquestionable. Any ambiguity threatens closure. That's why even minor inconsistencies, a missing body, a false skull, sealed files, carry enormous psychological weight. People don't ask, did he survive? They ask, why does this feel unfinished? And unfinished history is dangerous, because unresolved endings allow extremists to rewrite narratives, propaganda to mutate, and lies to masquerade as alternative truth. The survival theory persists, not because it's proven, but because certainty was never delivered, and the absence of certainty creates its own shadow. The final paradox, why the truth may never matter. Here is the most unsettling conclusion of all. Whether Hitler died in 1945, or escaped, or vanished under layers of misinformation, the result is the same. The world moved on, without full transparency, and that sets a precedent. It tells future generations that some truths are negotiable, some endings are political, some answers are withheld for stability. This case is no longer about Hitler. It's about history itself, who controls it, who edits it, and who decides when questions should stop. Because when official narratives are accepted, without complete evidence, truth becomes something we assume, instead of something we verify. And that may be the real reason this story still haunts us. Not because Hitler might have lived, but because the world may have accepted, and ending it never truly confirmed. So did Hitler escape? Probably not. But did the world receive absolute certainty? Also no. And that's why this question still haunts history. Because when the truth is incomplete, the story never ends. If you believe history should never rely on blind trust, comment, open the files. If you think unanswered questions are dangerous, comment, history deserves truth. And if you want more deep investigations into the story's history rushed past, subscribe, because some deaths end lives, and some deaths never really end the story.